Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I want you to picture this. It's an all too common scenario. An employee is just sitting at their desk, going about their day, they get an email, and they click a totally harmless looking link. But instantly, a malicious website opens right inside their company laptop. Malware runs in the background, credentials get scraped, and suddenly, boom, an attacker is roaming freely inside the corporate network. It happens all the time. So today, we're going to dive into exactly how high-risk organizations are using a really fascinating technology called browser isolation to completely stop these web-borne threats dead in their tracks. We're going to explore what folks in the industry often call the digital air gap. Let's get into it. Right, so let's dive into this somewhat dramatic reality we're facing. For years, we've relied really heavily on local firewalls and endpoint protection. They've been our go-to. But here's the catch. When an employee clicks a malicious link, that code is actively invited in. The malware basically runs inside the browser, right there on the laptop, effectively bypassing those traditional perimeter defenses entirely. So the firewall did its job, sure, but as you can see from the quote here, it just can't stop what happens inside the browser session itself. It's a massive blind spot. And it's exactly why modern security architectures are undergoing such a massive shift right now.
We've got a highly structured agenda for today to really demystify this technology. We'll start with the firewall's blind spot, then define what browser isolation actually is, and dig into how it technically works. After that, we'll look at real-world industry applications, how to scale it by organization size, and finally, how to select your ideal solution.
Let's start with Section 1, the firewall's blind spot.
Listen, there are three massive trends really forcing a shift at the CIO and CISO level today. First off, browsers are now the absolute primary target. I mean, think about it. Phishing emails, fake login pages, infected ad networks, they all target the browser first. Second, remote work is just ubiquitous now. Employees are working from airports, hotel lobbies, their living rooms, which makes it incredibly hard to rely purely on local, managed network security. And third, zero-day threats. These attacks completely bypass your signature-based local firewalls because, well, the firewall doesn't even know the threat exists yet. The landscape has totally changed, and our defenses really need to evolve to keep up.
So how do we solve this? That brings us to Section 2. What is browser isolation? I absolutely love the contrast in philosophy here. Think of a local firewall like a security guard standing right at the physical front door of your laptop. They check what comes in and what goes out. And hey, that's incredibly useful. But if a really slick, dangerous visitor manages to talk their way past that guard and actually gets inside the house, your guard might not be able to stop them from trashing the place. Browser isolation, on the other hand, puts that dangerous visitor in a completely separate, disposable room miles away in the cloud. The user only receives a safe, interactive visual stream. It's literally like watching a live video feed of the website. Absolutely zero actual web code ever touches the user's machine.
Let's move to Section 3 and see how isolation actually works in practice. Let's walk through the mechanics of this step by step. Step 1. The user clicks a link. Just like normal, nothing changes for them. But Step 2 is where the magic happens. The website opens in an isolated cloud browser entirely off the company network. Step 3. Let's say there are malicious scripts, zero-day exploits, or ransomware on that page. They get triggered, sure, but they stay trapped inside that temporary cloud environment. Step 4. Only a safe, pixel-perfect visual representation reaches the employee's device. And finally, Step 5. The very second the user closes that tab, the isolated environment is completely destroyed, taking the malware right down with it. So the crucial takeaway here is that risky web code never, ever executes on the laptop in the first place. You are dramatically shrinking your attack surface.
Okay, let's ground this in reality with Section 4. Real-world industry applications. Let's start with banking and financial services. For banking employees who are accessing customer portals and managing high-net-worth accounts all day long, phishing and credential theft are massive, literal, existential risks. Browser isolation keeps unknown, potentially risky websites completely separated from those highly sensitive endpoints. The business value here, it's huge. We're talking about a direct, measurable reduction in account takeovers and devastating malware incidents.
Now consider government and defense. Government workers and intelligence analysts frequently have to research obscure topics out there on the open, unvetted web. Because of that, they are prime targets for highly sophisticated nation-state attacks, which almost always utilize browser-based exploits. Isolation provides a vastly stronger layer of protection for these sensitive systems simply because the malicious code cannot physically jump the gap from that cloud isolation chamber back to the government device.
And the applications are just as critical in telecom and manufacturing. Just think about a massive telecom company with a huge, sprawling contractor ecosystem. Or picture a manufacturing engineer who constantly needs to download external supplier manuals or new hardware drivers straight to the factory floor. Compromised downloads can literally halt production networks. It happens. Whether it's a remote contractor or a plant engineer, isolation creates a rigid safety buffer between the wild internet and the internal network, greatly reducing the chance of those incredibly costly production disruptions.
Finally, for sectors like aviation, transport, and education, this tech solves really unique scale and resilience problems. A browser-based malware infection in aviation can literally ground flights by taking down logistics and scheduling systems. And in education, you're dealing with thousands of student and staff devices browsing literally every corner of the web. Cloud-based isolation ensures mission-critical resilience for transport. And for schools, it means vastly simpler security administration. Why? Because you are no longer crossing your fingers and relying on having the absolute perfect endpoint configuration on every single student's laptop.
Section 5. Scaling by organization size. Let's see how this actually fits your specific team.
Looking at this matrix, we can quickly see how implementation shifts as a company grows. A small manufacturing firm with maybe 100 employees, they can start really simply. Just route all internet browsing and email links through a cloud isolation service for everyone. It's easy and it's effective. A mid-size enterprise might focus first on isolating only unknown websites and risky downloads to strike a balance between performance and security. But look at the large enterprise and highly regulated rows at the bottom. A massive global bank isn't treating everyone equally. They are using highly complex, policy-based isolation. They might isolate browsing for tens of thousands of users with totally different customized policies for regular employees, third-party vendors, and highly privileged system admins. It scales exactly to what you need.
And finally, Section 6, selecting your ideal solution. My biggest piece of advice here, please don't just immediately ask which brand or logo is best. Start by answering these 5 strategic questions about your specific network traffic and your users. 1. Do you want to isolate everything or just the risky stuff? 2. Are your users actively downloading files? And if they are, how are you going to strip the hidden malware out of those files? 3. Do you have external vendors constantly poking around your internal apps? 4. Does this need to tie seamlessly into your wider Zero Trust identity framework? And 5, you have to be honest with yourself here. What is your actual priority? Is it absolute maximum security, keeping costs down, or just getting something deployed by Friday? Take a screenshot of this, literally right now. Mapping your customer type to this recommended approach is your fundamental selection playbook. If you're a cost-sensitive SMB, look for remote browser isolation, or RBI, that just targets unknown sites. If you're a growing enterprise, you really need policy-based controls and the ability to sanitize files before they ever hit the device. For large regulated spaces, you absolutely must have zero trust integration. And if you are running critical infrastructure or government systems, you need full default isolation for all external browsing, coupled with incredibly strict download controls.
Now, let's take a step back and be totally objective for a second. Browser isolation is not some magical silver bullet. It does not mean you can suddenly throw away your firewalls, ignore endpoint protection, or stop training your users to spot phishing emails. Network and local firewalls are absolutely still necessary for handling overall traffic. But browser isolation must be evaluated as a strategic zero-trust control for literally any high-risk environment today. It is rapidly becoming the absolute first line of defense, simply because it accomplishes something a firewall just can't do. It stops untrusted content from ever touching the endpoint in the first place. To wrap this all up, let's distill this entire explainer into one thought. Local firewalls try to block bad traffic based on what they already know, while browser isolation assumes the entire web is inherently risky and physically keeps that risk away from the device entirely. It is a completely different paradigm, and it's exactly why the world's most targeted organizations are rapidly adopting it. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Is your current firewall setup truly enough to protect against modern web threats? If you found this explainer useful, please subscribe and comment below with your specific industry, whether that's banking, manufacturing, or education, so I can create a customized product selection guide tailored exactly to your environment. Thanks so much for joining me, and stay safe out there.